What started as a routine interview quickly turned into a moment no one saw coming. What happens when a routine conversation on live television takes an unexpected turn? Make sure to subscribe to Table Turn and like and comment for more real talk show coverage. It begins the way most daytime talk show segments do. The cameras are steady, the audience is warm, and the conversation feels structured but casual. On this particular morning, Tom Cruise is seated at the table across from Whoopi Goldberg and the rest of the panel. He is there to promote an upcoming film, and the tone at first is exactly what viewers expect: polite, upbeat, and focused on his latest project. Tom Cruise is known for being composed during interviews. He leans slightly forward as he speaks, maintaining eye contact with whoever asks the question. His answers are concise but enthusiastic. Whoopi Goldberg listens with her usual attentive posture, occasionally nodding, occasionally interjecting with short comments that keep the conversation moving. The early portion of the segment stays safely within the realm of entertainment. They talk about filming challenges, stunt coordination, and what it takes to prepare physically for demanding action sequences. Cruise explains how much he values practical effects and performing his own stunts. The audience responds with light applause when clips from the film are shown. Everything feels comfortable. The shift begins subtly. After discussing the film, Whoopi transitions the conversation toward the broader theme of celebrity influence. She references past moments in Tom Cruise's career when he has publicly spoken about personal beliefs and how those views intersect with public health and media responsibility. Her tone is measured. She doesn't accuse. She frames it as a cultural discussion. Cruise listens carefully. His posture changes slightly. He leans back instead of forward. He folds his hands on the table. There's a brief pause before he responds. He says that he understands why people bring up his past statements, but he emphasizes that he believes in informed conversations and personal accountability. Whoopi nods, but she follows up. She clarifies that her concern isn't about personal belief, but about influence. She explains that when someone with a global platform speaks strongly about controversial topics, people listen. Her voice remains steady, but her words are firm. At this point, the energy at the table shifts. The other co-hosts glance between Cruise and Whoopi. The studio audience quiets in a way that suggests they sense the conversation is moving into more serious territory. It's not confrontational yet, but it is no longer promotional. Cruise responds by saying he never intends to mislead anyone. He explains that when he speaks publicly, he does so from conviction, not from a desire to create controversy. He says that over the years, he has learned the importance of phrasing and timing. His tone is controlled, but there's a noticeable tightening in his expression. Whoopi presses slightly. She asks whether he regrets the intensity of certain past interviews. She references how heated debates on television can sometimes overshadow the original message. She doesn't raise her voice. Instead, she speaks in the calm but direct manner she's known for. Cruise pauses again. This pause is longer. He shifts in his seat and glances briefly toward the audience before returning his focus to Whoopi. He says that he believes passion can sometimes be misinterpreted as aggression. He adds that when topics are personal, it's difficult not to speak strongly. The conversation begins to feel less like a standard interview and more like a discussion about accountability. One of the co-hosts gently attempts to pivot back to the film, asking about the collaborative environment on set. Cruise answers briefly, but Whoopi circles back, asking whether public figures have a responsibility to separate personal advocacy from professional promotion. That's when the tension becomes more visible. Cruise leans forward again, this time resting his forearms on the table. His voice grows firmer, not louder, but more emphatic. He says he doesn't believe in separating who he is as a person from who he is as a professional. He explains that authenticity matters to him. The audience reacts with a mix of murmurs and scattered applause. It's not a clear endorsement of either side, just recognition that something serious is being discussed. Whoopi maintains eye contact. She doesn't interrupt him mid-sentence, but when he finishes, she responds by saying authenticity is important, but so is impact. She explains that daytime television reaches a broad demographic, including people who may not have access to full context when they hear strong statements. Cruise's expression hardens slightly. He says that he trusts audiences to seek information. He suggests that it's not the role of a talk show to filter personal conviction. At this moment, his tone carries more weight. It's not explosive, but it's undeniably sharper than earlier in the segment. The other co-host attempts to lighten the mood with a quick comment about how passionate conversations are part of live television. There's a small laugh from the audience, but it doesn't fully break the tension. Whoopi responds by saying she's not questioning his right to speak. She clarifies that she's asking whether reflection over time has changed how he approaches public dialogue. Her voice remains level, but there's firmness behind it. Cruz answers more directly now. He says that he stands by speaking his mind, even if the delivery wasn't perfect in past moments. He adds that growth doesn't mean silence. It means refining how you communicate. His hand gestures become more pronounced as he explains this point. At this stage, viewers at home would likely notice the shift in pacing. The back and forth becomes quicker. The pauses between statements shorten. The body language tightens. It's still controlled, still within the boundaries of daytime television decorum, but it's no longer comfortable small talk. The segment that began as a routine promotional interview has clearly transformed into something more layered. The studio audience senses it. The co-hosts sense it. And as the discussion continues, the atmosphere at the table feels charged, not chaotic, not out of control, but undeniably tense. This is where the disagreement begins to solidify, not through raised voices, but through competing views on responsibility, influence, and the power of public platforms. And as the cameras remain steady and the red light stays on, both Tom Cruise and Whoopi Goldberg prepare to take their positions a step further in a way that live television rarely allows without consequence. As the conversation continues, the tone becomes more deliberate. No one is speaking over anyone else, but the rhythm has changed. The earlier promotional energy is gone, replaced by something more analytical. Viewers watching live would notice that the smiles around the table have softened into focused expressions. Tom Cruise sits upright now, shoulders squared. He looks directly at Whoopi Goldberg as she speaks, listening without interruption. Whoopi, for her part, maintains the same calm delivery she's known for, but there's a careful emphasis in her phrasing. She reiterates that the purpose of her questions is not to revisit controversy for its own sake, but to understand how public figures evolve and how they communicate sensitive topics. Cruise responds by acknowledging that evolution is part of anyone's career. He says that over time, you learn how different audiences interpret what you say. He explains that live television captures moments without the benefit of editing or reflection, and sometimes that can magnify intensity. His tone remains measured, but there's a subtle edge to it, as if he feels the need to defend his intent more firmly. Whoopi listens, nodding once. Then she asks whether intensity itself can overshadow credibility. She frames it carefully, explaining that when conversations appear heated, viewers often focus more on the tone than the substance. The question lands quietly, but directly. There's a pause. Cruise presses his lips together briefly before answering. He says that passion should not automatically be interpreted as hostility. He explains that when you care deeply about something, your energy reflects that. He adds that the media sometimes labels strong conviction as aggression because it makes for an easier headline. One of the co-hosts interjects gently, saying that tone and perception can be difficult to separate in a visual medium like television. She mentions that audiences don't just hear words. They read facial expressions, gestures, and body language. Cruise nods, acknowledging the point, but clarifies that responsibility for interpretation is shared between speaker and viewer. At this stage, the audience in the studio grows noticeably quiet. The light applause that usually punctuates comments has stopped. Instead, there's an attentive silence. The camera occasionally cuts to wide shots of the table, capturing the stillness between exchanges. Whoopi shifts slightly in her chair, folding her hands on the table. She says that her concern comes from years of hosting conversations that can influence public behavior. She emphasizes that when a celebrity with global recognition speaks strongly about personal convictions, people may follow without questioning. Her tone is not accusatory, it's reflective, almost cautionary. Cruise leans forward again, this time resting one hand flat against the table as he speaks. His voice grows firmer, not louder, but more emphatic than before. He says he believes in encouraging people to think independently. He insists that he has always advocated for individuals to do their own research and make informed decisions. Whoopi responds by saying that the average viewer doesn't always approach celebrity commentary with skepticism. She points out that trust plays a role. The trust audience's place in entertainers can extend beyond movies or performances. That trust, she suggests, carries weight. Cruz's reaction is immediate but controlled. He says that trust should be based on transparency. He reiterates that he speaks openly about what he believes and why. He adds that authenticity sometimes means standing by your words even when they're unpopular. The exchange is no longer subtle. It's not loud or chaotic, but it's clearly a disagreement. The co-host to Whoopi's left attempts to balance the discussion by acknowledging both perspectives. She says it's possible to value authenticity while also recognizing the influence of a platform. Her tone is conciliatory, aiming to steady the energy. For a brief moment, it seems like the conversation might pivot back toward neutral ground. Cruz nods in acknowledgement of that middle ground. Whoopi agrees that nuance is important. The audience releases a small collective breath, as if sensing a potential easing of tension. But then Whoopi asks one more question, direct, but delivered calmly. She asks whether there was ever a moment when Cruz looked back at a past on-air exchange and thought, I could have handled that differently. The question hangs in the air longer than any previous one. Cruz doesn't answer immediately. He glances briefly toward the audience, then back at the table. His jaw tightens slightly before he speaks. He says that hindsight always provides clarity. He admits that there were moments when the delivery could have been calmer. However, he stresses that he does not regret standing up for what he believed in. His voice carries more force now. The emphasis is unmistakable. The audience reacts with scattered applause, mixed with a few murmurs. It's not overwhelming, but it signals engagement. The tension is not explosive, but it's building in intensity. Whoopi responds by saying that standing up for beliefs is admirable, but she emphasizes that delivery shapes reception. She gives an example of how heated exchanges on live television can distract from the message itself. Her tone remains even, but the firmness in her posture suggests she is not backing away from her point. Cruz replies more quickly this time, and there's a noticeable change in pacing. He says that sometimes media narratives amplify conflict. He implies that certain moments are replayed repeatedly, creating an impression of volatility that doesn't reflect the broader context of his career. One of the co-hosts attempts to step in, lightly suggesting that live television can sometimes magnify emotions because there's no opportunity to pause and regroup. The comment is intended to diffuse tension, but it also underscores the reality of the moment. They are, in fact, live. The camera captures a close-up of Cruz as he responds again. His tone remains controlled, but there's clear intensity behind it. He says he is comfortable being passionate, and he refuses to apologize for caring deeply. The word refuse lands firmly, and it's the strongest language he's used so far. The audience reacts audibly this time, some applause, some surprised murmurs. Whoopi remains composed. She doesn't interrupt. She waits until he finishes completely before speaking. When she does, her voice is calm, almost softer than before. She says that no one is asking for an apology for caring. She clarifies that the conversation is about reflection, not regret. The distinction is subtle, but important. For a brief second, there's overlapping speech as Cruz begins to respond before she finishes her sentence. He quickly stops himself, gestures slightly as if to signal he'll wait, and allows her to complete her thought. The interruption is minor, but noticeable, a sign that emotions are closer to the surface. By this point in the segment, the dynamic at the table has shifted completely from a standard promotional interview to a broader discussion about public accountability. Viewers watching live would likely notice how still everyone has become. The co-hosts are no longer casually leaning back in their chairs. Instead, they're angled forward slightly, listening carefully to every word exchanged between Tom Cruise and Whoopi Goldberg. Cruz's tone remains controlled, but there's no mistaking the firmness behind it now. His responses are shorter, more pointed. He seems focused on clarifying his stance rather than elaborating broadly. When he speaks, his hands move in small, deliberate gestures, emphasizing key words rather than filling space. Whoopi maintains steady eye contact. Her voice stays level, but she becomes more precise in her phrasing. She reiterates that her questions are not personal attacks. She explains that daytime talk shows often serve as spaces where cultural conversations unfold in real time. When high-profile guests engage strongly, those moments can ripple outward far beyond the studio. Cruz nods once, acknowledging the point, but he adds that public figures are often expected to carry an unrealistic burden. He says that entertainers are not policymakers or medical professionals, and that audiences should differentiate between personal opinion and professional authority. His emphasis on that distinction is clear. The studio audience reacts with light applause at that statement. It's not overwhelming, but it signals agreement from some in the room. At the same time, the applause is brief, almost cautious, as if people are aware they're witnessing a delicate exchange. Whoopi responds by saying that while entertainers are not policymakers, influence doesn't require official titles. She speaks about how cultural impact works, how visibility alone can shape perception. Her voice remains calm, but there's a firmness to her words that underscores the seriousness of her point. Cruz leans back slightly, then forward again, as if deciding how directly to respond. He says that influence cuts both ways. He suggests that media platforms also shape narratives and that sometimes the framing of a conversation can intensify a disagreement that might otherwise remain measured. The comment isn't accusatory, but it carries weight. One of the co-hosts steps in gently, acknowledging that live television doesn't always allow for nuance. She says that editing can create clarity, but live discussion reveals raw emotion. The remark feels like an attempt to contextualize what viewers are seeing in real time. There's a brief pause. The camera widens, capturing the full panel. No one is smiling now, but no one appears angry either. The atmosphere is serious, focused. Whoopi then asks Cruz whether he believes there is a difference between conviction and confrontation. The question is framed thoughtfully, not provocatively. She explains that sometimes audiences struggle to distinguish between strong belief and dismissiveness. Cruz answers immediately this time. He says he believes confrontation implies hostility and that he has never intended hostility. His voice tightens slightly on the word never. He adds that disagreement is not inherently disrespectful. The exchange becomes more direct. Whoopi says she agrees that disagreement is healthy, but she notes that tone can unintentionally signal dismissal, especially when conversations involve complex issues. She references how some viewers felt alienated during past high-profile interviews, not because of the content, but because of the intensity. Cruz's posture stiffens. He responds that intensity is not the same as disrespect. He says he expects robust debate in public forums and believes audiences are capable of handling strong dialogue. There's a firmness in his cadence now, a rhythm that suggests he feels misunderstood. The audience reacts again, this time with a mix of applause and murmurs. It's clear that the room is divided, or at least thoughtful. One co-host attempts to redirect the energy by asking Cruz whether these kinds of conversations have influenced how he prepares for interviews today. It's a softer question, focused on growth rather than conflict. Cruz takes a breath before answering. He says that preparation matters, but authenticity matters more. He explains that he doesn't want to enter a conversation rehearsed to the point of being disconnected from real feeling. His delivery is calm, but there's a visible determination in his expression. Whoopi listens, then responds by saying that authenticity and reflection can coexist. She points out that growth doesn't mean abandoning passion, it means channeling it effectively. Her tone is almost mentoring, not adversarial. For a moment, the tension seems to ease. Cruz nods slightly, as if acknowledging that perspective. But then he clarifies that he believes media narratives sometimes reduce complex conversations to sound bites. He says that when moments are replayed without context, they create an image that doesn't always reflect reality. This comment subtly shifts the focus toward the role of talk shows themselves. The audience senses it. There's a noticeable stillness. Whoopi responds carefully. She says that platforms like this one aim to present full conversations, not fragments. She emphasizes that the goal is dialogue, not distortion. Her voice remains steady, but her expression is serious. Cruz replies that he respects that intention. However, he adds that once a moment leaves the studio, it takes on a life of its own. Social media clips, headlines, commentary, all of it can amplify one sentence beyond its original meaning. The co-host to Whoopi's right nods in agreement, acknowledging the unpredictability of viral moments. She remarks that live television carries a certain risk precisely because it's unscripted. At this point, Cruz's tone grows firmer than at any previous moment. He says that he is willing to take that risk, but he will not dilute his convictions out of fear of misinterpretation. The statement lands heavily, not shouted, but unmistakably forceful. There's a sharper reaction from the audience now, some applause, some audible shifting in seats. It's the closest the segment has come to feeling heated. Whoopi doesn't react emotionally. She doesn't raise her voice or interrupt. Instead, she waits for the applause to subside and then responds calmly. She says that no one is asking for dilution. She reiterates that the conversation is about impact, not censorship. For a brief moment, both speak at once. Cruz begins to respond while Whoopi finishes her sentence. He stops himself quickly, but the overlap is noticeable. It's a small signal that emotions are closer to the surface than earlier. Cruz clarifies that he does not feel censored, but he does feel judged for being passionate. His voice softens slightly on that word, judged. It's the first time there's a hint of vulnerability beneath the firmness. Whoopi acknowledges that perception can feel personal. She says that public dialogue often blurs the line between critique of ideas and critique of character. Her tone is steady, almost empathetic. The atmosphere shifts again, not back to lightness, but toward a quieter intensity. The disagreement hasn't disappeared, but it has evolved. It's less about defending positions and more about clarifying intentions. As the segment approaches its final stretch, viewers at home would likely sense that this exchange has gone further than initially expected. What began as a film promotion has turned into a broader reflection on media, influence, and responsibility. Neither side has raised their voice, yet the tension has been unmistakable. And with only a few minutes left before the commercial break, the question now becomes how this live, unscripted conversation will find its conclusion without either side appearing to retreat or escalate. As the segment moves toward its conclusion, the focus gradually shifts from tension to resolution, though not in a dramatic or abrupt way. Cruz leans back slightly, taking a deep breath, and his posture softens. He acknowledges Whoopi Goldberg's points about the influence of public figures and the importance of reflection. His voice remains steady, calm, but carries the weight of someone intent on being understood rather than arguing. Whoopi listens carefully, nodding slightly, and emphasizes that the purpose of her questions was never to challenge his integrity, but to encourage discussion about how powerful voices affect public perception. She frames her comments around responsibility rather than judgment, keeping the conversation grounded in reasoned dialogue. The co-hosts quietly interject supportive comments that help steer the discussion toward closure. They note that both Cruz and Goldberg have highlighted valid points, the value of authenticity and passion, alongside the responsibility that comes with visibility. The tone around the table is noticeably lighter now, even as both maintain a sense of seriousness appropriate for the subject. Cruz takes a moment to summarize his perspective. He says that he believes in being genuine in all public interactions and that he respects the role of thoughtful conversation. He emphasizes that while he stands by his past actions, he also values insight into how his words might influence others. His gestures are controlled, and his tone conveys earnestness rather than defensiveness. Whoopi responds with equal calmness. She says that dialogue like this is important, especially when it encourages both audiences and public figures to consider the ripple effect of words. She expresses appreciation for Cruz engaging in the discussion thoughtfully, acknowledging that live television can be an intense forum for nuanced conversations. The studio audience reacts with polite applause, signaling recognition of the civility and depth of the exchange. There are no dramatic cheers or loud reactions, just attentive acknowledgement that a meaningful discussion took place. The audience's response reflects the shift from tension to understanding. As the show transitions to its next segment, the hosts briefly summarize the discussion for viewers at home. They highlight that the exchange offered insight into both the pressures of public life and the ways in which strong personalities navigate challenging conversations. Clips of the exchange begin circulating online almost immediately, with viewers commenting on the measured intensity, the careful tone, and the thoughtfulness both Cruz and Goldberg displayed. Social media response is active, but generally respectful. Many posts focus on the balance between authenticity and responsibility, praising Cruz for articulating his perspective clearly and Whoopi for maintaining calm while pressing thoughtful questions. Some viewers share clips and comment on how unusual it is to see a conversation that is serious, tense at moments, but never hostile. Analysts and commentators also weigh in, emphasizing that the exchange demonstrates the potential for live talk shows to foster substantive dialogue without devolving into argument. Later, interviews with the hosts clarify the intent behind the segment. They note that the conversation was designed to explore broader societal questions rather than target any individual. Both Cruz and Goldberg are quoted in follow-up statements, reinforcing their mutual respect and acknowledging that live discussions naturally carry energy that is sometimes interpreted differently in clips online. By the end of the episode, the tone has fully shifted back to measured calm. The panel thanks Cruz for joining the show and for engaging in such an open dialogue. He offers a final comment on the importance of learning from past experiences while remaining true to oneself. The audience responds with a final round of applause, subdued but warm, marking the conclusion of a segment that began with light film promotion and evolved into a meaningful conversation about influence and communication. For viewers at home, the takeaways are clear. Passionate discussions can remain respectful, public figures can engage thoughtfully on sensitive topics, and live television provides a platform for reflection as well as promotion. The exchange leaves a lasting impression without resorting to sensationalism, showing how measured conversation can be both engaging and substantive. Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Table Turn for more narration-based talk show stories.